the Sahel, a vast belt of scorched earth stretching across Africa, where the Sahel Desert meets the savanna, a region forgotten by most, ignored by many. But beneath its unforgiving surface, something unthinkable was happening. Something the world would never have believed until it was too late. This is the story of a nightmare that existed in plain sight. A network of underground prisons where human beings were buried alive, held for ransom, and forgotten by the world above. This is the story of how an elite global force uncovered the impossible and brought hell itself to justice. It began with silence, not the peaceful kind, the terrifying kind. The kind that follows when someone vanishes and never returns. Over the span of 18 months, aid workers disappeared across the Sahel region. Doctors, engineers, teachers, volunteers who came to help communities rebuild. One day they were there, the next gone. No demands, no bodies, no trace. Governments launched investigations. Families pleaded for answers. International organizations issued statements. But the trail went cold every time. It was as if the earth had swallowed them whole. Because it had. Deep within Secret Elite's intelligence division, analysts noticed a pattern. 23 foreign nationals had vanished across 5 Sahel countries: Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Chad, and Mauritania. Standard kidnappings in the region usually resulted in ransom demands within 72 hours. But these cases produced nothing. No contact. No proof of life. Just void. That was the first anomaly. The second was geographic. Every disappearance occurred within a 200-kilometer radius of remote desert regions. Areas with no strategic value, no resources, no infrastructure. Areas where no one would think to look. The task force deployed reconnaissance drones equipped with ground-penetrating radar. What they found defied comprehension. Beneath the sand, in locations scattered across the desert, were structures. Not natural caves, not ancient ruins. Purpose-built underground facilities. Hidden chambers carved into bedrock, accessible only through concealed entrance points. Someone had built prisons beneath the Sahel Desert, and they were occupied. The discovery triggered an emergency mobilization. If these facilities were what intelligence suggested, they were looking at something unprecedented. A network of subterranean detention sites operating beyond the reach of any government or international body. A shadow system designed to hold hostages indefinitely, extracting ransoms from families while keeping victims hidden from rescue operations. Secret Elite assembled a joint task force: desert warfare specialists, intelligence analysts, hostage rescue teams, and regional experts. They had one objective: locate every site, identify every victim, and dismantle the network before anyone else disappeared. The first challenge was scale. Initial radar sweeps identified 9 potential sites across a region the size of Western Europe. Some were crude, converted natural caves reinforced with concrete. Others were sophisticated, multi-chamber complexes with ventilation systems, guard posts, and supply tunnels. The construction alone suggested years of planning and significant financial backing. But who was behind it? Intelligence intercepts provided the answer. An extremist faction operating in the Sahel had evolved beyond traditional insurgency. They had industrialized kidnapping. Instead of demanding immediate ransoms and risking rescue operations, they developed a long-term model. Capture high-value targets, hide them underground, and negotiate from a position of total invisibility. Families paid because they had no choice. Governments couldn't intervene because they couldn't find the victims. The financial records told a darker story. Over 3 years, the network had extorted an estimated $78 million from desperate families and corporations. Every payment funded further expansion. More sites, better concealment, enhanced security. The operation had become self-sustaining, growing in complexity with each successful ransom. But the human cost was incalculable. Intelligence analysis suggested that over 100 people had been held in these facilities at various points. Some were released after payment. Others were moved between sites to avoid detection. And some, those whose families couldn't pay or whose governments refused to negotiate, simply remained buried, forgotten. The task force knew that a conventional rescue operation was impossible. The sites were too dispersed, the terrain too hostile. The moment one facility was breached, The others would execute contingency protocols, moving prisoners, collapsing tunnels, eliminating evidence. If they were going to save these people, they needed perfect intelligence and simultaneous action. Phase 1 was infiltration. Undercover operatives, posing as sympathetic intermediaries, made contact with the network's negotiators. Over weeks, they gained insight into the organizational structure. There was a central command cell that coordinated all operations, regional managers who controlled individual sites, and guards who rotated between facilities to prevent them from forming attachments to prisoners. The network communicated through encrypted satellite phones, used coded language for all transactions, and maintained strict operational security. But every system has vulnerabilities, and Secret Elite found theirs. A low-level courier, responsible for delivering supplies to the underground sites, was identified and placed under surveillance. Over 30 days, his routes were mapped, every stop logged, every interaction recorded. He unknowingly revealed the location of 7 facilities, but 2 sites remained hidden, and intelligence suggested those 2 held the highest value prisoners, including 4 missing journalists, 3 aid workers from a European organization, and a geologist kidnapped from an oil exploration team. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former guard, disillusioned with the network after witnessing conditions inside the prisons, made contact with a regional human rights organization. He provided detailed layouts of 2 facilities he had worked at, including ventilation, shafts, escape routes, and guard rotation schedules. He also revealed something chilling. Prisoners were kept in complete darkness, sometimes for months, to break their psychological resistance. With all 9 sites mapped, Secret Elite finalized the operational plan. 9 simultaneous raids coordinated across 5 countries, executed under the cover of a desert sandstorm to mask aerial insertion. The margin for error was 0. If even one site received warning, hostages would be moved or eliminated. The entire network had to fall at once. The task force assembled 140 elite operators, drawn from special forces units across 12 nations. They trained for 3 weeks in desert environments, practicing close-quarters combat in confined spaces, medical triage for malnourished hostages, and rapid extraction under hostile conditions. 0 hour was set for 0300, during the darkest phase of the moon. Weather forecasts predicted a major sandstorm, reducing visibility to near zero and grounding any potential enemy air surveillance. The night of the operation, the desert was alive with silent movement. Helicopters, flying low and dark, inserted teams at precise coordinates miles from each target site. From there, operators moved on foot through the sand, navigating by GPS and thermal imaging. At Site 1, buried beneath a dried riverbed in northern Mali, the entry team located the concealed access hatch disguised as a rock formation. Thermal scans detected heat signatures below, guards and prisoners. The breach was surgical. Flash grenades disoriented the guards before they could die. Within 90 seconds, the facility was secured. In the darkness below, 11 hostages, emaciated, traumatized, but alive, were found chained in a stone chamber. At Site 2, a multi-level complex in eastern Niger, resistance was heavier. Guards opened fire as the task force descended through the ventilation shaft. A firefight erupted in the narrow tunnels. But the operators were prepared. Suppressed weapons, night vision, and superior training overwhelmed the defenders within minutes. 14 hostages were recovered, including a family of 4, parents and 2 children, who had been missing for 9 months. Site 3, hidden beneath an abandoned village in Burkina Faso, revealed the network's cruelty in full. The prisoners had been held in cells barely large enough to lie down. No light, minimal food, total isolation. When the rescue team breached the chamber, the hostages recoiled in terror, unable to comprehend that salvation had arrived. 7 people were freed, including an elderly aid worker who had been presumed dead for over a year. Across the desert, the operation unfolded with relentless precision. Site 4, a cave system in southern Chad, yielded 9 hostages. Site 5, a converted mining tunnel in Mauritania, held 12. Each raid followed the same pattern: rapid breach, guard neutralization, hostage, extraction. No time was wasted. Every second mattered. But Site 7 presented a complication. Intelligence had identified it as the network's central detention facility, the location where high-value prisoners were held under maximum security. The task force found it exactly where the defector had indicated, beneath a remote plateau, accessible through a vertical shaft camouflaged with desert brush. The breach team descended into darkness. 60 feet below ground, they encountered reinforced steel doors and a more heavily armed guard force. The firefight was intense but brief. When the final chamber was breached, the team found 16 hostages, including the 4 missing journalists who had been investigating extremist activity when they were captured. Among them was a woman who had been held for 14 months. She had kept a mental calendar, marking each day by scratching the stone wall with a fragment of metal. 427 marks. 427 days of believing the world had forgotten her. Now, surrounded by armed rescuers, she collapsed in relief. By dawn, all 9 sites had been secured. The simultaneous nature of the assault meant that no warning spread, no contingencies activated, no evidence destroyed. The entire network, 3 years in the making, was dismantled in a single night. The final count was staggering. 89 hostages recovered alive from the underground facilities. Ages ranged from 8 years old to 67. Nationalities spanned 14 countries. They had been teachers, doctors, engineers, journalists, geologists, aid workers, and innocent civilians caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Some had been held for weeks, others for over a year. All believed they would die in those dark chambers. 43 network operatives were detained during the raids, including guards, logistics coordinators, and mid-level commanders. Documents seized on site revealed the full scope of the operation. Ransom negotiations, financial transactions, prisoner transfer logs, and expansion plans for additional sites. But the most critical capture happened hours after the initial raids. Using intelligence gathered from the seized documents, Secret Elite located the command cell, operating from a fortified compound 200 miles from the nearest prison site. A precision raid extracted the leadership intact, along with hard drives containing the complete operational archive of the network. In the weeks that followed, the rescued hostages were transported to secure medical facilities where they received treatment for malnutrition, dehydration, and psychological trauma. Reunions with families, who had spent months or years believing their loved ones were lost, were emotional beyond words. Children saw their parents again. Spouses embraced after unimaginable separation. Lives, shattered by cruelty, began the slow process of healing. The financial networks that sustained the prison system were dismantled with equal precision. Bank accounts in offshore havens were frozen. Cryptocurrency wallets used for ransom payments were seized. Shell companies that laundered the money were exposed and shut down. $78 million, blood money extorted from desperate families, was recovered and redirected toward victim support services. The extremist faction that built the network was crippled. Without its leadership, without its financial infrastructure, and with its operations exposed, the organization fractured. Regional cells scattered. Recruitment dried up. The network that once believed itself untouchable had been obliterated. But the world knew almost nothing. Governments, bound by classified agreements, released only minimal statements about a successful counter-terrorism operation in the Sahel region. Media coverage was brief. A few headlines about rescued hostages, no details about the underground prison network or the scale of the operation. The full truth remained sealed in classified files. This is the burden of Secret Elite. They operate in the shadows so that others can live in the light. They face nightmares so that the world sleeps soundly. They carry the weight of knowledge that most people will never bear, the knowledge of how close evil came to triumph. The Sahel Desert still stretches vast and unforgiving. But beneath its surface, the prisons are empty now. The chambers that once held the innocent are sealed. The network that profited from suffering is destroyed. And 89 people who should have died in darkness are alive because someone refused to let them be forgotten. This is what Secret Elite does. This is why they exist. Not for glory, not for recognition, but for the simple, profound truth that every life matters, that every victim deserves rescue, That evil, no matter how hidden, will be hunted down and destroyed. The operation is closed. The files are sealed. The hostages are home. But the mission continues, because somewhere in the world, another nightmare is forming. Another innocent life hangs in the balance. And when that moment comes, the call will go out again. Silent, relentless, unstoppable. And the answer will be the same. Not on our watch. Not while we breathe. Not ever.